Hi, John. How are you?
Glad to be here.
It is just a pleasure to have you here. Welcome to the set of Pawns.
I love it.
I remember a long time ago when we were doing a gig together and I was actually doing the song in my set and you were saying, oh, I hope you're going to do that song a couple of times when we played together. So this is the space where we actually filmed the movie. So
Right.
I'm so
Absolutely.
delighted to have you here as part of this right now. And I'm actually really excited to talk to you a little bit about your journey through music and through life in general. Tell me a little about your background. Are you in New York City?
Born and raised on the Upper West Side.
Is that right? Wow, that's awesome. And a little bit about your early days. Inclinations, acting, music. What came first for you? Did you want to be a musician? Did you want to be an actor?
Well, the early stages was I have an older brother, 3 years older, and when he first played the Arthur Godfrey ukulele that had a little attachment that you didn't have to figure it, you just pressed the buttons and it would play the chords and stuff. So he was probably maybe 7, I was maybe 4. And then he eventually got an acoustic guitar, and then I got an acoustic guitar. He eventually got a Fender Stratocaster. I got a Fender Stratocaster, and geez Louise, I wish I would have held on to that Fender Stratocaster back then. And was always self-taught, never took lessons, played a little piano. I knew I was a very musical kid, but never studied anything until one time when my brother went to Oberlin College for just for one semester. But during the Christmas holiday, a friend of his named Kim something came with a string bass and left it for a couple of weeks under our Steinway grand piano. And I picked it up. I must have been, let's see, if Arthur was 18, I was probably like 15, something like that. Picked it up, and after a couple of days of just kind of farting around with it, not knowing what I was doing, I, for the first time ever, walked into my parents' room and said, I'd like to take lessons. I just, and I remember when I was, I think, 12 years old, I was walking down in the 40s, and I saw a guy with a string bass, and I just followed him. I was riveted by the instrument.
I would have been intrigued as well. Sure. So that's your foray into the bass world then.
Foray into the bass world.
Interesting.
Back then, when I never did well in high school. I was in every class that was preceded with the word slow. Yeah, slow math, slow Spanish, slow everything. And I decided that I wanted to go to a music school, not necessarily because I knew I wanted to be a professional musician, but I knew I didn't want to have to deal with math and science again. And back then, if you were strong enough to carry a bass up a flight of stairs, you could get into lots of different schools. Because back then, the story that I had heard was usually the cellist who they told weren't going to make it as cellist, but you could make it as a bass player. So they were hot for people who said, I want to be a bass player. So I went to visit a whole bunch of different schools, and funny, when I tell people, they're always surprised, but I went all around the country by myself to all these different schools. Because nowadays you hear about kids going with their parents, and
Yes.
so I went to all these different schools, and I didn't know enough to know what were the good music schools or who were the good bass teachers and stuff. I didn't know anything about it. And I remember one time I went to, I went to Curtis and was there for an hour or so, and I said, well, this just doesn't feel like it's my kind of place. I went to, I think, Peabody. I knew I didn't want to be in New York City.
Right.
That I knew.
Been there, done that.
So one of the places I went to was, of course, I knew they had a good music school, was University of Indiana.
Oh, right, that's right.
And when I went there, was supposed to have a meeting at like 2 o'clock with the great head of the bass department. I found out later, Murray Grodner. And I got there kind of early, and so I went to this diner, and I remember very vividly saying, I'll have a tuna fish sandwich on rye and a chocolate egg cream. The woman looked at me, she had no idea what I was talking about.
That's a New York thing,
Correct.
those egg creams.
So I looked at her, I said, and very, very sweet, I said, would you like me to show you how to make a chocolate egg cream? She said, yes. I went behind the counter and got the chocolate and the milk and the seltzer. And as I was drinking my poorly made chocolate egg cream, I said to myself, I mean, this gives you some idea of how in tune I was with what a great schools all these different places were. I said, I can't see myself being in a town that they don't know how to make a chocolate egg cream. So I never went to the meeting, and I flew home. And the only school I did not visit was the University of Michigan, so I said, that's where I'm going to go, and loved it from the moment I walked into the campus in Ann Arbor. You've
got to be very intuitive to be able to make a decision like that based on that experience. That is phenomenal. That is really phenomenal. So you went there for 4 years. So did you learn to read music in that time when you were there studying music?
I had started learning when I was taking lessons and stuff. Okay. And I enjoyed it. I enjoyed practicing. And at Michigan, I just had just a peak 4 years for myself. I mean, I was playing in the symphony orchestra, playing in the jazz band. I'd wheel my bass down the diag, and I'd see some people playing bluegrass, and so I played with bluegrass people. And then there was a coffee house in Ann Arbor back then. This was 63. It's a coffee house called the Canterbury House. That was, I discovered, was part of the kind of coffee house circuit. So all these folk singers at the time would have a weekend at the Canterbury House. Everyone from Doc Watson, Cooney, whatever his name was, Michael Cooney.
Did Ramblin' Jack Elliott come through there?
Ramblin' Jack Elliott, Tim Buckley, Janice Ian, Richie Havens, Len Chandler. And what I would do, I would show up there at around 5 o'clock when these people would get there for their sound check. And I don't know how good I was, but I was always fearless. So they would walk up on this little platform with their guitar and a mic on the guitar and a book for their singing, and I would just walk up to their right in the back and start playing with them. Never asked if I could. I just walked right up. And after maybe 2-3 bars, they didn't stop their sound check. They looked at me and kind of smiled. And I wound up playing with all those people that you mentioned.
You were like the house bassist for the Canterbury.
I was the house bass player.
That's incredible.
I was the house bass player.
So you met all of these people?
All those people, and probably a lot more also.
Do you have any recollections of Janice Ian when you played with her? So this must have been early on in her career then.
And these people had, my theory is guitar player singers love having a supportive bass player, even if they don't know it yet.
Absolutely.
So it worked out. So walked up with Janice, and I didn't know who any of these people were whatsoever. But from that point on, Janice called me, and the moment that I graduated University of Michigan, I remember I hitched from Ann Arbor to Philadelphia to do a gig with Janice.
That's amazing.
What was amazing is uh, hitching with a string bass from Ann Arbor, Michigan. And someone gave me a ride to the entrance of I-95. And at I-95, I'm waiting for quite some time. And then I said, you know what? I'm going to see what happens if I unpack the bass and start playing. As soon as I did that, 3 cars stopped.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I asked which one was going closest to Philadelphia, and there was a boxer who was on his way to do a fight that night in Philadelphia, and I went with him to Philly. Okay. So I get a call from Janice, and it happened to be the day after, or the day I graduated. I never did the cap and gown thing. I was left at 6:30 in the morning to try to for an 8 o'clock gig that night with my little suitcase and my bass. And I get a ride eventually to the entrance of I-95, and I'm waiting at I-95. No cars are stopping. And after about an hour or sort of waiting, I said, you know, I'm going to give something a shot. And I unpacked the bass and start practicing, and 3 cars immediately pull right over. And I asked each one of them, I told them where I was headed. And one of them was a amateur boxer who was headed that night to Philly for a boxing match. And I remember back then he was going to make $100.
Okay.
So I played. I got calls right after college. Did gigs with Len Chandler. Did gigs with and Janice had never had a bass player.
That is wonderful.
Buckley had never had a bass
That's
player.
incredible.
And then started recording with those people, but that where it all kind of.
The reason I asked about Janice was because as a young girl, I idolized her, and I knew all of her songs and how to do the picking of the songs and whatnot. And when I was living in Los Angeles, I had gone to a building where they worked on keyboards that needed repairs, and this particular place was where Stevie Wonder would have all of his stuff refurbished and whatnot before he would have a gig in Los Angeles. And I went to visit my friend, and when I came out of the building and went to my car, I realized I had locked my keys in my car. But back in those days, I always carried a little notebook with me because I was always scribbling little manna that would fall from heaven, little phrases and lines for my songs. And I turn around as I'm trying to get into my car, and walking past me is Janice Ian. She had just come out of a gym to do a workout. So I stopped her, of course, and I said, oh my goodness. And I introduced myself, and of course I'm telling her that she was an idol for me growing up. So I asked her to sign my book, so she took my little book, and to this day I still have this little square in the book that says, to Beth and her door locks.
Oh, that's great.
It was so
That's
funny,
great.
yeah.
That's great.
And then she, of course, came across the street here to the Guthrie Center and did a show years later, and I got to say hello to her again. But I think that's wonderful that you got to play with her so early in life.
Played a lot with love play with her.
Yeah, that's great. That is really great. So, you just have such an amazing journey with all of this, and just I'm sensing just how intuitive you are, with being able to flow with whatever's going on. Like I said, in acting or music, and you seem to go with the music. How did you come upon your Broadway thing? I mean, you had said to me once many years ago, happy wife, happy life. And, you know, knowing, of course, that you've had something to do with Broadway, did this have anything in relation to the show, I Love My Wife? Is that where that little saying came from?
No, I don't know about that. I mean, that's the happy wife, happy life is just something that I always tell all my friends who are getting married. No, uh, after college and starting to play with these people, then I started getting pretty active in the recording scene in New York.
New York City.
Playing behind different singers, playing behind records, doing a lot of TV commercials, film scores, you know, all different things from, you know, playing a week with Sinatra at Carnegie Hall.
You played for an entire week with Sinatra at Carnegie Hall?
With a huge orchestra.
Oh, wow.
And I was one of the string bass players with it and stuff. So, you know, freelance musicians, we get calls for whatever it is and just show up. So you don't know sometimes in the recording studio, you don't know who it's going to be for. You just find out, should I bring the upright bass or the electric bass? And got a call, and there was a John Denver record. I mean, lots of different things.
Was it any of his giant hits that you played on the record?
No. I played on the ones that you find that people are selling on the street on Broadway.
Deep tracks.
I think there was a John Denver one that we did. I don't know if it ever even. I think it was Songs of the Road. I mean, just probably the worst record he'd ever done. But did anyway. So it started with that, and just, you know, there was a lot of work, a lot of gig work in New York, a lot of recording work in New York, and a lot of you know, went on the road, was Leonard Cohen's music director for a long time. And
how did you find him, or did he find you?
You know, with the phone rings. The phone rings. A great producer friend of mine named John Lissauer, who I had done lots of different projects with and recording things with him, with lots of different great people, and he then was asked. He connected with Leonard, and then did a record with Leonard, and then that group, we went out on the road when John Lissauer was the music director. Lissauer was the guy that was the producer eventually of Hallelujah.
Is that he was the one that produced Hallelujah?
Correct.
So did you tour during that era when that was?
No,
was this prior
no.
to that,
Well, I was with
after?
Leonard in the '70s when Leonard was big in Europe and not all that big here.
Oh, that's interesting.
We played places like the Troubadour, but not Madison Square Garden.
The Troubadour in Los Angeles.
Correct.
That's my favorite venue of all times and all places. I love that venue.
With him there, played with Tim Buckley there, played with a bunch of other people there. So it's not like Leonard, it's not like these stars know of you. Whoever their music team is, the music team says, let me find the people who I think would be right for this project.
Oh, that's very interesting.
Whether it be a recording session, whether it be a recording session with, you know, 50 musicians, or someone's record with 4 musicians.
So this is done with some real foresight then, back in that time when they were putting people together.
I mean, every time the phone rings, whether it's for a $50 blues gig or for, you know, some $1,000 gig, it's the same MO. Mm-hmm. Someone says, hopefully they need a bass player. Who's on the list of bass players who we feel can add something to this style, who are easy to get along with, who will show up on time, and either play exactly what's written, or maybe nothing's written, and we want them to do
Bringing it to life.
what they do.
Sure.
I had a situation that I was telling my wife Connie that I'm surprised I never told her. You know that great tune, Mark Cohen's tune, Memphis?
Yes. Yes, that's a great tune. I was walking in Memphis.
I've known Mark, as a lot of us New York players did, as a jingle singer in New York. Yeah. And then we stayed in touch, and then I got a call from him. He said, "Listen, we finished this track, but I would like you to come with your upright bass just to see what Johnny Miller might add. We have no idea. We just want you to hear it and see what goes through your mind." So I get there at the studio, and I say, "The guys, just play the track over and over again." It was a very well mixed track.
What studio were you working? Do you remember? No?
I remember. And I don't know if this was a studio that they had recorded it. Maybe they recorded it someplace else.
Sure.
But this is where they just wanted to do some overdub.
Overdubs, yeah.
But it was all mixed. Everything sounded impeccable. And I say, keep on playing the track, and I'm, zipping up the unzipping the bass and rosining the bow and taking out some, because there wasn't any music that they had.
Right.
So I'm taking out some manuscript paper to just kind of jot down some notes and stuff, and adjusting the stool, adjusting the light, excuse me, and they're playing it, and I'm listening and listening. I said, "Could you play it just one more time?" And I'm listening, and then I start to pack up the bass. Put the bow in the thing, put my pencil. They say, "Where are you going?" I said, "Guys, it's impeccable the way it is. There is absolutely nothing to add. Certainly whatever I add is only gonna make it worse.
You felt it would detract.
And I will be so presumptuous to say I wouldn't add anything. But that's your guys' call." So hopefully those are the reasons why musicians get called, because of their kind of musical instincts about this might be right, but it's the person who wrote the song. Our job is to make sure they are a happy camper.
That's interesting.
And if some singer tells me, "Here's a waltz, I would like it to be done in a reggae style," it's not for me to say, "Are you fucking kidding me?" It's my job to say, "I will give you the best 3-4 reggae I know how to give you."
There you go.
That's what they want.
That's interesting. So that being said, did you have some interactions directly with Leonard when you worked with Leonard?
Oh,
Cohen as far as-
Leonard and I, it was like,
Tell me about some of those interactions.
I'll tell you. I mean, Leonard and I he was, I would say, one of the most influential people for me. When we went on the first tour with John Lissauer, Leonard sometimes after the gig, after they'd take us to some fancy, reception or something, at around midnight, Leonard would call and say, "Comrade, let us go out and have an adventure." And wherever we were, we'd meet in the lobby at 12:30, and we'd go out and we'd get some wacky adventure. And then when it came, a couple of years later, when Lissauer was unavailable to do the tour, and then when I put the band together, it was the first time I got a band with drums with Leonard. He had never had drums before. When I did it with Lissauer, it was just keyboard, bass, and guitar, and two background singers. And then when I was in charge of it, I added drums. And when I was auditioning two background singers, one of the auditions I got was an unknown woman by the name of Laura Branigan.
Is that right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Uh, so you know come up with the background vocal parts and kind of I mean Leonard's music. The beauty about playing with playing Leonard's music, and I always encouraged all of my friends to hopefully be able to play with Leonard, is it's truly uh, an exercise in less is more, and you cannot leave enough space. And because magic stuff happens when everyone's leaving space.
In the spaces. My mentor, Joe Shermy, taught me that. He was the bass player for Three Dog Night,
Right.
and he always would say that less is more, and it's about the spaces and where you leave them. Yes.
So I'll tell you one great Leonard story. This was years later when he was living in California and I was in New York, and we weren't. Oh no, I'll tell you two great stories. One was uh, with Lissauer. We were we were rehearsing. We were gig. We were going to do at a club in New York called Joe's Pub, and with one of Leonard's background singers. This was maybe 25 years since I had seen Leonard. And so we're rehearsing at this rehearsal studio, and Leonard walks in. Hadn't seen Leonard in at least 25 years. Leonard, we take a break. Leonard comes up to me, and the first thing Leonard says after 25 years is, "Comrade, how many times do you have to wake up in the middle of the night?" That was Leonard's opening line. Then, maybe a year or so later, Leonard called when he was in New York, and he always would stay at the Royalton Hotel on 46th Street.
Royalton Hotel on 46th Street.
Um, and he would call around midnight, this particular time, and said, "Comrade, let us meet at our usual place." And our usual place was a Howard Johnson's on Broadway in the 50s. We'd meet there, and our conversations were somewhat like my dinner with Andre. Just completely free form, no agenda. And then about 1 hour later, Leonard would say, "All right, let's have an adventure." So we decided that we were going to go to Chinatown, but with a goal. The goal was to find the smallest Chinese restaurant that we could find. That was the goal. So we get in a cab. We're going down the West Side Highway. Leonard and I are talking. And the cab driver, with a thick Russian accent, "Are you Leonard Cohen?" "Yes," he said. I don't know the name, Boris Yalakovsky." To which Leonard says, "The famous Russian poet?" He says, "Yes." The two of them are now schmoozing intently for the next 15 minutes as we're driving down. Leonard says, "Boris, what do you usually make on a good night?" He says, $200. Leonard says, "Shut off the meter. I'm going to give you $500 cash. Take us to your favorite Russian restaurant." He drives us. It's now 2 in the morning. He drives us to this nondescript place in Brighton Beach, Brooklyn. Open up the door, and it's like the scene in The Wizard of Oz where all of a sudden it's Technicolor. We open the door, in this desolate part of Brooklyn. Open the door, bright lights, 200 people dancing, singing, a Russian band, waiters with trays of Bellini and vodka. We stay there with Boris, who knows everyone. We stay there with Boris until about 7 in the morning. We were the last ones to leave. That's an example of Leonard's. That's an example of why I hit it off so great
Well,
with,
it also,
with
and
Leonard.
you
Said something that really that made it pointed for me was that no agenda.
No agenda.
And I'm sure that, and you as well, it's really hard to find people that don't have an agenda.
Correct.
And your shield is always scanning, because you never know when it's coming and who it's coming from.
That's right.
But it's
That's right.
it's there, and that actually touches my heart, because the whole thing about not having an agenda is just so important in life.
There are two of Leonard's poems that I always liked and remembered. One of them was have you or have you not made love with any of my friends? It's not just something I want to know, it's the only thing I want to know. That was one. And the other one that occasionally I would say when I used to be invited into the garden was I didn't realize until you walked away that you had the perfect ass. Forgive me for not falling in love with your face or conversation. That was another one of his great ones and stuff.
That's great.
So, yeah, Leonard was a profound mentor.
Yeah, and as are you. And I can see, I can almost feel what you gave to each other.
Right,
So yeah, you carry that with you, which is it's very special. That's very nice, and I'm sure that you gave him things too that he carries it from you as well. I'm sure. Yeah, yeah. So much about music